Mezcal, the smoky older brother to tequila, but what exactly is it? Well, in this video, I plan on telling you everything that you need to know about mezcal, starting with what is it and where does it come from, what is its history, and finally, what does it taste like? Hopefully, by going over those three aspects, I will give you a very basic understanding of what this spirit is. So let's get to it. What is mezcal? Mezcal was originally a term that was used to describe any spirit that was distilled from the fermentation and distillation of the heart of the agave plant. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, wait a second, that sounds pretty familiar. Isn't tequila made from the agave plant? Yes, it is. The saying goes that all tequila is mezcal, but not all mezcal are tequila. Tequila is made with a very specific kind of agave plant. So think of mezcal as almost like the category of spirits of anything that's made from the agave plant, except that there are a couple of exceptions, and we'll get to those in a little bit. So unlike tequila, which can only be made from one kind of agave, mezcal can be made from about 30 different varieties of agave species. Well, so before we get into the specific kinds of varieties of agave that mezcal can be made from, let's talk about how mezcal is made in general. So we first start off with the agave plant. This is a gigantic and monstrous plant that can go up to crazy heights. And usually takes anywhere between 6 and 25 years to grow to full maturity before it can be cut and harvested to then make this wonderful spirit. And the very traditional way to produce mezcal starts with the jimadores going out into the field and chopping off the leaves of the agave plant, and you're then left with the heart of the agave plant, or known as the piña. And so the producers of mezcal will take this piña, they need to cook it to release the nectar in it, which will then allow it to ferment and then distill. And in the most traditional way to cook the agave plant, what they'll do is they will create a big pit in the ground, they'll layer a bunch of charcoal, lava rocks, firewood, and light that on fire, and then they'll put the heart of the agave in this pit, and then they'll cover it with dirt and soil and let that cook for several days. That actually is what ends up giving mezcal its traditional earthy and smoky flavor, because since the smoke cannot go anywhere, it kind of infuses the agave with that smoky flavor. And so once it's done cooking, what they'll do is they'll take the agave out of these pits, and they need to crush it to get to the nectar that's inside. Traditionally, they will either do this by hand with clubs and knives and things like that, and that's super labor intensive, or they'll use what's known as a tajona, which is a giant stone or cement wheel that is pulled by horse, donkey, or mule, and this goes around in a circle crushing the agave plant. I know, super old school, but you know what? Making mezcal sometimes, it's all about that craftsmanship. And so once the agave is all pulverized and broken apart, they'll then take all of that and ferment it and distill it and turn it into this amazing spirit. All right, so now that we've kind of covered how mezcal is traditionally made, let's talk about the different varieties of mezcal. Like I mentioned before, there are over 30 different species of agave plant that can be used to create this amazing, fantastic spirit. Traditionally speaking, 90% of all mezcal is made from the espadín species of mezcal. You also have Tobalá, Tobaziche, Tepestate, Arroqueño, and Madrequiche, which are just a couple of the different varieties of agave that can be used. And so why is that important that there's so many different species? Well, each species has its own characteristic flavors and distinct profiles that end up making its way through the distillation process, and you get vastly different spirits based on which species you're using. The other thing that gives mezcal such incredible variety in flavor and taste and smell is terroir, which is a term in spirits that refers to the geographical location, the soil, the environment in which these plants and things that get distilled grow in, because they all play a role. You know, you're not gonna have the same spirit if something is grown in the rainforest as it is in the desert. Typically, agave grows really well in desert areas, but the different soils do impact the flavor of the agave, especially because agave plants take sometimes up to 25 years to grow to full maturity before they can be harvested, which is insane. And so that much time spent in contact with the earth, that creates this incredible complexity and flavor. Like you could have two of the same species of agave plants grown in two very, very different climates, and they'll have different flavor profiles possibly, depending on the soil and the things that happened to it while it was growing. But all right, so now that we've talked a little bit about what mezcal is, how it's produced, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the origin of mezcal. So there's a really awesome urban legend that says that a really, really long time ago, there was this lonely agave plant just chilling out in the desert, and all of a sudden it got struck by lightning. And the lightning cooked the insides of the agave plant, which then fermented, and eventually someone stumbled upon it and decided to drink the insides. And that inside is called pulque, which is the fermented juice of the inside of the agave plant. And that's actually what ends up getting distilled into mezcal. And this pulque was seen as a gift from the gods. And that meant that agave became super revered in ancient Mexican culture. The story then goes, and this is disputed, that when the Spanish were, trying to take over the whole world and they had control of Mexico, they brought with them a lot of different European wines and spirits, but once that ran out, they needed something else to drink. And they didn't quite really like the pulque. They thought it was too weak for them. And so the Spanish government allowed certain higher-ups that lived in Mexico to start producing mezcal. Now, there are some people that will argue that there was distillation of agave prior to Spanish colonialization of Mexico, but I'm just trying to tell you everything that I know. It's disputed, and I'm not really sure who's right. But that's kind of a very super quick general origin story for this spirit, and I can't think of a more awesome origin story for anything, quite frankly. The thing got struck by lightning and someone discovered it. That's pretty cool. You'll remember that at the beginning of this video, I said that mezcal was the categorical term for any spirit that was made and distilled from the agave plant. Now, that still technically is true, but in 1994, something happened that kind of changed that. Mexico created a denomination of origin for mezcal. A denomination of origin is simply a set of laws that govern how and where a spirit can be made, in an effort usually to try and keep the quality of the spirit high. Now, some people will argue that DOs actually have an inverse effect of what they expected and actually cause more harm than good. But in 1994, mezcal kind of ceased being a category term and is now a more specific spirit term. And so what does that mean? That means that today, for something to be called and labeled a mezcal, it has to be made in one of a couple of states in Mexico. Traditionally, Oaxaca has been the biggest producer of mezcal. About 90% of all mezcal gets produced in Oaxaca, but mezcal can also be produced in Guerrero, Durango, San Luis Potosi, Puebla, and Zacatecas. And there are a couple of more stipulations, but I don't want to get too much into that. But essentially what that means is that mezcal is now a specific spirit, even though a lot of people do consider mezcal still the broader term. It's still kind of a little confusing. I don't know what the right answer is, but that's kind of where we're at right now. But all right, now that I've kind of given you a very basic understanding of what this amazing spirit is, it's time to drink. So right here, I have a couple of different bottles of mezcal, and I want to start off by talking about Del Maguey. Mezcal was always seen as kind of like the little brother to tequila because in 1974, Mexico made tequila the national spirit of Mexico, and that propelled it into the stratosphere. And while tequila was conquering the world, mezcal was kind of seen as more of an artisanal, more old school kind of spirit that didn't have wide appeal. That all changed with Del Maguey. To this day, Del Maguey's Vida is probably the most common bottle of mezcal that you'll find in the US, though there are a lot more brands today than there have ever been. This is the introduction to a lot of people, including myself, into the world of mezcal, and it is one that I love as well. I also have a bottle of Los Vecinos del Campo, which is my current favorite mezcal that I carry at my bar. And then I have a bottle of Oaxaca mezcal, which is really nice as well. I just got it recently and I'm still playing with it. All three of these are Espadín mezcals, and I also have a Oaxaca Ensemble? I'm not sure how to say it. Essentially, an ensemble is a mezcal that uses multiple varieties of mezcal in the production of the spirit. So this one is 50% Espadín, 25% Madre Quiche, and 25% Tobalá. So we're gonna start off with the Vida. Man, that is damn good. It is it kind of tastes like it smells. You have that earthy minerality, agave flavor that's not too dissimilar from tequila, from like a good tequila, but at the same time, you get that smoke that fills up your nostrils and fills your mouth with that smoky flavor. But you also have a really nice sweetness about it. Now, I'm gonna skip the other two because they both are Espadín mezcals, and I'm fearing that this video is getting a little long. So we're actually just going to try the Ensemble from Oaxaca that, like I said, is a mixture of 3 different agave species. You might be wondering, why do you only have a small little bottle? Well, because these things are expensive. Because mezcal is so labor intensive, it's not uncommon for a well-made mezcal to go into the hundreds of dollars for one bottle. So I have a smaller bottle, saved for special occasions like sharing it with you. You get this really cool earthy minerality to it, but it's not as sweet as, say, the Vida. So to kind of wrap it up, what can you expect from mezcal? You can expect a good amount of smoke, you can expect a good amount of earthiness, but you can expect that awesome kind of agave flavor that you might be accustomed to from drinking good tequila. But all right, guys, I have a couple of amazing bottles of mezcal to get back to, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.